We hope you're having a great 4th of July weekend. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. And welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was another terror attack, this time in Istanbul. The state of Wisconsin's Government Accountability Board finally closes its doors. Dozens of brick-throwing youth confront police in the Sherman Park area, and police investigate whether the near riot may have been planned. Summerfest opens its doors. Looks like it's going to have some great weather. The House panel released its Benghazi report. Hillary Clinton leads in the polls but faces new questions about the FBI's investigation of her use of a private email system. The military lifts its ban on transgender servicemen and women. But we start with failure. Educational failure and the crash and burn of a modest plan to fix some failing schools in Milwaukee. The commissioner of what was supposed to be a turnaround project for failing schools in Milwaukee abruptly resigned last week. Damon Means had been appointed to the job by Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele under a new state law that was aimed at turning around some of Milwaukee's failing schools. Now, here are some numbers. According to the State Department of Public Instruction, 28,000 MPS students attend a school that fails to meet expectations. That's a failing school. Only a quarter of the students are proficient in English. Fewer than 17% of Milwaukee students are proficient in math. At some schools, only a handful or no students at all are proficient in reading and math. Now, the new state law was designed to try to fix that. The law let Abele and Means designate a handful of schools for turnaround. In the end, they were talking about trying to single out only one school, one. Means and Abele tried a conciliatory approach, denying they wanted to take over any schools, but even their very modest proposal met with resistance from MPS officials. A day after a public interest law firm warned Means that he'd failed to comply with the requirements of state law, he quit, returning to his day job as superintendent of the Mequon-Thiensville Public Schools. The teachers union applauded Means' departure, while legislative Republicans seethed, with one Senate leader threatening to cut funding for the state's largest school district. Now, joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Mikel Holt, former State Representative Michelle Litjens, defense attorney Dan Adams, and the president of the Wisconsin Policy Research Institute, Mike Nichols. Mike, what happened? What killed this turnaround plan?
MPS killed it, the teachers union and the school board. It is remarkable, you used the word modest, how modest that plan was. They weren't trying to take over schools. They weren't trying to fire teachers. They were going to let the teachers continue to work for the school district. They came really with open arms, saying we're going to provide wraparound services for children who need them, children who in some schools cannot read. And 0 children's schools, and yet they were basically, MPS turned around and spit on them.
Okay, Mikel Holt, one school. Why would one school be too much?
Because the boogeyman is coming, you know, and so some Democrats and the teachers union jumped up, some board members jumped up and said this is a takeover. If the state wanted to take it over, they could take it over tomorrow. They have the authority to do that. You know, what they're doing is blocking the schoolhouse door. We're forgetting, we're talking about 28,000 black kids, so they don't count.
Why did they feel so threatened? What was the main concern?
They said this will open up the door for a takeover. It's totally ridiculous. They should have jumped on board, because they're throwing slingshots, you know, at armored tanks here. You know, if the state wants to take it over, they will.
Michelle Litjens.
And you're right, this would open the door if one school became successful because they did it differently. Right. More schools would follow, right? But you know, Chris did not want to do this from the beginning. Damon Means did not want to do this. He was always a supporter of MPS and the status quo, and so I think he quit, and now Abele gets his way without doing this.
I mean, this has a feeling that it was set up to fail.
I don't know. You know, Abele's plan, very modest, right? It was a modest law, and he took it and really was pretty creative about doing this no harm to the institution, which I take issue with as its basis. But it was a do no harm approach, and the teachers union, to their credit, I guess, as obstructionists, just said no, none, not at all. They lied consistently. They used Chris Larson's campaign for county executive as a communication channel to lie about what this was, and they've reached their objective. Now, but strategically, long term, they're going to lose in the end, because people are going to say, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it, and it's going to come from the state.
The reality is that failure is acceptable to the city of Milwaukee. because they accept it. Failure is acceptable to people who run the Milwaukee Public Schools because when they were offered a little bit of a lifeline, they refused it. Their investment in failure, I think, was on display here. You know, they were not afraid that Demond Means was going to come up with some schools that would fail those kids. They were afraid that they might succeed.
And this is
Isn't that something? They were afraid that they would succeed and that would show them up.
Absolutely. You know, sadly, State Representative Polly Williams is turning over in her grave because this is why we ended up with school choice the first time. This is why she wanted a separate black district
but here,
so that we could control the education.
Now here's my unsolicited advice. Well, I'll get to that in a little while. But, you know, all this talk about cutting funding and all of those things, you don't cut funding. What you do is you follow the line that you're talking about. You maybe, you know, liberate the parents to get out of those schools. What has your glass half full? What has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my glass half full because the state would receive millions of dollars to establish treatment programs for heroin opiate users if a $1 billion federal program is enacted. My glass is half empty because no one at the state or federal level thought to allocate funds when the black community faced the crack epidemic. But now that drugs have reached the suburbs, well, you know the rest of that story.
Michelle Litjens.
My glass is half full because Republicans exposed some major atrocities in the handling of the Benghazi attack. It is half empty because the left will only use this report as a witch hunt instead of using this to make sure Americans are never left to die again.
Dan Adams.
My glass is half full because of the terrible terrorist attack in Istanbul, which killed 42 this week. My glass is half full because many of my friends in that country are all okay. I was an AFS foreign exchange student there in 99-2000. Turkey is a cosmopolitan country full of wonderful people, and I hope this tragedy will strengthen their secular political traditions and, two, increase their resolve to join us in destroying ISIS.
Mike Nichols.
Demond Means is gone, and that's unfortunate. But here's where the glass is half full. Maybe now the legislature will get serious about truly circumventing the MPS school board and trying to save some of those kids in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Well, my glass is half full because Gallup polls finds that Hillary Clinton has the worst highly unfavorable rating of any candidate in modern political history, 7 points worse than Barry Goldwater back in 1964. It's half empty because her highly unfavorable rating is eclipsed by Donald Trump's 42% highly unfavorable rating. Our Sunday Insight Countdown shows the Republican National Convention begins in 15 days. The Democratic National Convention is 22 days away. And the presidential election just 128 days from now. And as we go to break, a former presidential candidate has a question about this year's campaign.
If you believed that Donald Trump was going to be the nominee and you believed that Bernie Sanders was going to come close, please raise your hand. If you just raise your hand, please don't drive an automobile here in the metropolitan area. You are a danger to yourself and others. You're crazy.
Free trade in the crosshairs. Now, here's an issue that some of the candidates seem to agree on. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, and Hillary Clinton are all criticizing free trade agreements. All of them oppose the recently negotiated Pacific trade deal. And Trump is suggesting slapping a massive 35% tariff on some goods from countries like China. They all blame the deals for costing Americans jobs. But what about here in Wisconsin? Wisconsin exports $22 billion worth of products every year. That includes about $6 billion a year in industrial machinery, $2.5 billion in medical and scientific instruments, $2.2 billion in electrical machinery. And our biggest trading partners? Canada, Mexico, China, and Great Britain. So, on balance, Dan Adams, is free trade a good or bad deal for Wisconsin?
Well, as viewers of this show know, I'm a rare Democrat who supports free trade, kind of a la Bill Clinton, mid-'90s. And unfortunately, even in the Republican Party, I read a Pew Research poll that, in fact, 50% of Republicans are against NAFTA. That used to be, you know, pretty consensus-wide on the Republican side, that NAFTA was a good thing, free trade was a good thing. I mean, it's just...
This is now the issue propelling the Republican nominee.
And Trump and Clinton and Sanders and Feingold, all on this anti-trade thing. It's bewildering to me, and I think there's this dewy-eyed nostalgia for this idea that we're going to have guys in big foundries pouring molten lead and, you know, exporting cars around the world.
But I mean, you know, on the other hand, I mean, I can sympathize for, you know, workers that say, you know, Carrier or something like that, where, you know, the corporate managers are moving their jobs to Mexico, even though they're wildly popular, and they go, okay, then is there this huge sucking sound of jobs because of NAFTA?
No, surely there are pockets of people who are hurt badly. If you made furniture, your job got moved to China 15 years ago. But on balance, trade is a good thing. There's almost no doubt about that. You look at economists, almost across the board, that's what they'll say, that the impacts, the net impacts, growth in GDP across the board are beneficial. There's almost no doubt about that economically. But some people are going to get hurt, and those are the stories that get told.
It's like saying let's raise the minimum wage. 1 million people will lose jobs according to the latest research if we did that. I agree with Mike. On balance, it's good. I think this is just a political football that these candidates are throwing out right now. What would actually happen if if Trump put a 35% tariff? It would be economic suicide for America.
Well, I wonder whether people fully understand that, though.
They don't fully understand it. Like, they miss having their old manufacturing jobs. Wisconsin was such a strong manufacturing state, but we know...
We still are.
We are, but they also talked about if the TPP agreement goes through, Wisconsin egg exports are going to increase by almost $200 million and increase 700 jobs in the state. So we need trade in the state of Wisconsin.
I think this is, though, a failure of the business community, a failure of free market advocates to make this point, because the lost jobs are the ones that are highly visible, and people focus on that. What we don't see are the jobs that rely on exports. The reality is that you want to have manufacturing, you need to sell your stuff. 95% of the people in the world don't live here. You want to sell to those markets, right?
Most of the manufacturing jobs that were going to leave, they did leave. Some of them are deciding to come back. And I think now, and we should have presidential candidates talking about what can we do to make sure that jobs stay here and jobs come back.
700,000 jobs in Wisconsin due to trade. We should have television commercials out there focusing on people and saying one of 700,000 or 800,000 people.
I just wonder whether people have done the math on this 35% tariff. This would be the largest tax increase on American consumers in history. And people may say they're willing to pay more money, but just go to Walmart someday and see what they actually do. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we'll tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, mine is State Representative Mandela Barnes, who says he is challenging Lena Taylor because the district needs change. Last I heard, Lena had 103 bills passed in the law. In his 2 terms, Barnes hasn't had one change. Yeah, Mandela, you need to change your political strategy.
Michelle Litjens.
Hey, this is to everyone out there. Get out and enjoy Summerfest and your local fireworks in these next few days. Summer is short. Enjoy it while you can.
Absolutely. Dan Adams.
My advice is for Wisconsin lawmakers, do away with legislators' ability, yes, your power, to destroy your own records and replace them with summaries of your own making. Every other public official retains records, and you should too.
Mike Nichols.
To legislators looking for a way to pay for our roads, repeal minimum markup laws. Drivers who want better roads might actually be willing to pay more for them if they weren't already being bilked by special interests that unfairly push the price of gas up at the pump.
Amen. Well, my unsolicited advice is if the legislature still wants to try to do something for Milwaukee kids trapped in failing schools, don't cut the funding, don't break up MPS. Instead, expand school choice, break the monopoly, let parents break up the failed status quo. Next on Sunday Insight, how protesting paid off for one demonstrator and his lawyer. Protesting can actually pay off sometimes. Last week, the state of Wisconsin agreed to pay one protester $75,000 in connection with his arrest at one of the Capitol's many protests. Under the deal, radio host Dominic, whatever his name is, and his attorney get the $75,000 for his arrest 3 years ago during a crackdown by the Capitol Police of a singing protest that has been going on in the Capitol for more than 5 years. The lawyer said, hey, this is a good deal. I'm going to file another lawsuit on behalf of another 100 protesters who were also arrested in that crackdown. So the tab for taxpayers could get pricey.
But not necessarily.
Michelle, yeah?
So this gentleman was not a protester.
No?
He was observing the protest.
Right, he was a reporter. He was a radio guy.
Right. So Brad Schimmel...
I feel solidarity with him.
Let's hope not. But Brad Schimmel said that this was settling for $75,000 was actually saving taxpayer dollars. I can tell you these people are incredibly annoying. They still sing in the Capitol today. But
First Amendment, though?
No, the state
First
said...
Amendment gives you a right to be annoyed?
No, the state said that his case is different. Right. The rest of the protesters don't stand a chance actually to get any settlement.
Okay, his case
he was just
different
observing the protesters.
And he wasn't able to broadcast as a result. Right. So you don't think that the 100 other
not a chance.
Protesters, okay, what do you think, Dan?
Act 10 protest seems so retro at this point. I'm glad we've moved beyond this.
We apparently haven't.
It's a pretty good payday for this lawyer. I mean, he's going to get $45,000 or something to give you some scale. An assistant.
You did the math just like that,
an assistant district attorney in Milwaukee County, somebody who handles homicides, makes about that every year. So he had a pretty good payday. I'm glad that they just got rid of it rather than litigate it and have a bigger damage award down the line.
So again, my question would be, if I, and Mike Nichols and Mikel Holt, if we go down to Milwaukee City Hall and we're singing and we get busted,
I'll tell you what,
could we call
Charlie,
you?
Yeah, please call me.
Okay.
I really look forward.
All right, Mike Nichols, 75 grand.
Well, it's too much money, and the attorney got too much of it.
Yeah.
But as a guy who spent a lot of time as an observer at protests and meetings and things like that, you have a right. You have a right to be there. And I agree with Michelle that I don't think this is a precedent for the protesters themselves, who might be suing in the future.
Do you have a right, though, to disrupt, to basically go into a public building? And part of this, these solidarity singers. I mean, this is in the rotunda. It is in the open area, but they're obviously interfering with everybody else's ability to use that building.
I think that what has happened now is that they have to at least notify the administration that they're going to be there. And I've witnessed a lot of this, and it's irritating. But I would say yes, it's a people's house, and they do have a right to be there.
Okay, Mikel Holt.
And they sang off tune too. But I think I think I'm going down to City Hall. I remember a time when I was covering a Nazi Party rally on the South Side, and the police put me inside at their barricade. And I got hit upside the head with eggs and stuff. Is it too late to retain you?
Statutes of limitations. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think about. Well, you know what? If in fact, and I'm not going to second guess this particular settlement, particularly because it was a radio guy. But I'm thinking that if they're going to start handing out money for people whose rights were violated, how about the people whose rights were violated in the John Doe investigation? How about the people whose houses were raided in the pre-dawn raids, from your friend John Chisholm and his Flying Monkeys, and who were told that they couldn't leave their house and whose children were told they couldn't talk to anybody? How about at some point, those people who were not able to go to work and go about their lives, whose personal property was taken, if it is worth $75,000 for this guy to be inconvenienced for being busted for being part of that, how much would this be worth for the targets of that John Doe investigation? And when are those folks going to be held accountable? By the way, I thought it was very, very interesting. If you have not seen this, Kevin Kennedy, the ousted head of the Government Accountability Board, does an exit interview with Wisconsin Eye where he talks about his experience. If there was any doubt in your mind that he was exactly what conservatives thought he was, that he was a vindictive, conservative-hating partisan, just watch this, watch the interview, because Kevin Kennedy basically pulls the mask off and basically rips the conservative Supreme Court justices, rips the decision that shut down his John Doe investigation, rails against voter ID, all of these things. So, for people who imagine that Kevin Kennedy was, even-handed and nonpartisan, forget it. So what is it you don't get? Let's go around the table. Mikel Holt, you're first.
What I don't get is why gasoline is 30 cents cheaper in Madison than it is in Milwaukee. I actually asked Michelle, and she said it has something to do with some mandates. I think it has to do with some mandiculous. New word I just invented.
Okay, Michelle.
Charlie, I don't get why the military is willing to pay for transgender surgeries, but they are reducing housing allowances to save money.
Dan Adams.
I don't get other lawyers gnashing of teeth over the so-called robot lawyer that's helped to overturn 160,000 parking tickets. A Terminator for parking tickets? We need that in Milwaukee.
Mike Nichols.
I'll give you something mandiculous. Polls that say Trump could win, but I know so many conservatives who every day continue to tell me they simply can't vote for him. I don't get it.
Well, what I don't get is what Attorney General Loretta Lynch could possibly have been thinking when she had that secret meeting with Bill Clinton last week. Clinton is a possible target in the investigation of the Clinton Foundation, and Hillary Clinton is a target of the probe into her use of emails. Was she thinking anything at all? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. First, here's your morning news update. It is time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Mikel Holt, you're first.
Actually, no winners, unless you count the MTEA and PON parents who stifled a sensible attempt to educate failing poor children. The teachers union and the MPS board thinks they won a battle by getting rid of demand means. Nope. What these so-called supporters of public education did was block the schoolhouse door for 28,000 children trapped in failing schools. Isn't that ironic? Our so-called friends, the Democrats, blocking the schoolhouse door again.
Michelle Litjens.
My winner is a South Carolina man who had his concealed carry permit and stopped a mass shooting outside of a nightclub last week. The gunman shot 4 people and then the good guy shot back. Unfortunately, the 28,000 kids in Milwaukee who can't read or add proficiently in failing schools are the losers, and no one in the city of Milwaukee seems to want to do a darn thing about it.
Dan Adams.
My winner is former state representative Jason Fields, a rare moderate Democrat who is back in the mix, fighting to regain his seat in the assembly. He's going to win. My loser is Representative Latanya Johnson, who is running for state senate. Johnson's own child attended a private school through the school choice program, yet Johnson opposes the choice program for other children. Her hypocrisy is outrageous.
Mike Nichols.
My winner's downtown Milwaukee. You're not going to recognize the skyline in a year or two thanks to private sector investment by Northwestern Mutual, developers like Rick Barrett, not to mention plans to transform the Grand Avenue. This week we heard maybe a new theater by the Marcus Corporation. My loser, impoverished Milwaukee neighborhoods like Sherman Park. The homeowners who've invested there deserve better.
Well, there's a theme here. My losers, all those kids trapped in Milwaukee's failing schools who were utterly betrayed and abandoned last week. Winners, America. Our founding fathers gave us independence and a republic. Now it's up to us to keep it, somehow. Thanks for joining us and have a great 4th of July.